Hello friends, welcome to Learntricks Edutech, and this is our series of data visualization and types of graphs. So welcome to our next video, that is types of graph part 3. Now in this video we will see first is our scatter plot, then we will see the pictogram, etc. So first we will start with the scatter plot. Now the scatter plots are the charts used to visualize random variables with dot-like markers that represent each data points. These markers are usually scattered across the chart area of the plot. That's why it is called as scatter plot. The position of each dot on the horizontal and vertical axis indicates the value of an individual data point, and the scatter plots are used to observe relationship between variables. Now the scatter plot is similar to line plot or linear plot without having the line, right? So in the linear chart or line graph we were using the points and we were using a line to join these points, but in scatter plot the number of points is huge as compared to line graphs, and there is no line connecting to each value or each point or each dot. Okay, so we will see the next, that is, this is the scatter plot or one example of scatter plot. So we can divide data points into groups based on how closely sets of points cluster together, as well as this can be useful if you want to segment the data into different parts. Now this is the one example of scatter plot, and this example shows how we can group together or cluster together the data. So now here we are using GDP per capita and CO2 emissions per person in tons. So this is the relationship. Also we can find out the relationship between the x and y axis or y variable by using this scatter plot. Now here are lots of points with different colors, and the color shows the continents on earth. That is, the pink one shows the Africa, the another one shows the Americas, then the Asia, Europe and Oceania, right? So from this we can calculate that the GDP per capita, that is 1 into 10 raised to 3, 1 to 10 raised to 4 and 1 to 10 raised to 5, right? Likewise, and in tons, that is the CO2 emission per person. So this is 0.01 tons, 0.1 tons, 1 tons and 10 tons. So this likewise the y-axis is divided, and these are all the plots from points from the data set. So means this green point will be having the some GDP per capita value and for comparable CO2 value, right? So from this chart we can easily identify that there is the relationship between the x and y, that is, as the GDP per capita increases, means that as the GDP increases, the CO2 emissions per person will also increase, as well as, so this can be called as a positive correlation. And also we can find out that which continent is having less GDP or less CO2 emissions, as well as which continent is having higher GDP with higher CO2 emissions. So we can easily identify that the Africa and some Asian countries are having less GDP and less CO2 emission as compared to the Europe. These are having the higher GDPs and higher CO2 emission, right? So by using scatter plot we can find out the clusters, that is, we can make clusters. Sometimes by gathering or by combining the points which are plotted together we can find out or make the clusters also, as well as we can find out the relationship between x and y variables also by using the scatter plot. So next type or subtype of scatter plot is positive correlation. So two groups of data visualized on a scatter plot are said to be positively correlated if an increase in one implies an increase in other, and a scatter plot diagram can be said to have high or low positive correlation. Means when the variable on x-axis increases, At the same time, if the variable on y-axis increases, then it is called as positive correlation, and the high positive correlation or low positive correlation depends on the slope of that line passing through that all those points, right? So when the variable x and variable y are directly proportional, then it is called as positive correlation scatter plot. Similarly, when the x and y have the negative or the inverse correlation, then it is called as negative correlation scatter plot. Means the two groups of data visualized on a scatter plot are said to be negatively correlated if an increase in one implies a decrease in other. Also, the relationship can be highly negative or low negative correlation, right? So here the plot shows the negative correlation as well as it shows the regression line or the correlation line. So by finding out the slope of that correlation line, we can find out the relation is high or low, right? So as here we can say the negative correlation, how we can conclude it is the negative correlation. So as the value on axis data 1 or axis x increases, the values of data 2 decreases. That's why it is called as negatively correlation scatter plot or negative correlation scatter plot. And then third is, so first was positive, next was negative, and third is no correlation. Means two groups of data visualized on a scatter plot are said to have no correlation if there is no clear correlation between them. So by just viewing this figure, we cannot say that as the value of x increases, the value of y also increases, because the points are really scattered. They are not arranged in or grouped together in any one fixed manner. Means for there are all the values on y-axis. Again, for the value of 5 on x-axis, there are all the values on y-axis. So from here we cannot find out any relation. That's why it is this scatter plot is called as no correlation scatter plot. Now next type is a bubble chart. Now this bubble chart is somewhat a modification of scatter plot. So we will see how it is modified than the scatter plot. So a bubble chart is a multivariable graph that uses bubbles to represent data points with 3 dimensions, and it represents data points with bubbles with the first 2 variables determine the location of bubble on x and y axis, while the third variable determines the size of bubble. Means we are using a circular points, just like where we were using the dot type of markers or circular markers in scatter plot, but in scatter plot the radius of all the circular markers is same, but in bubble chart the radius changes as the third variable changes. Means the size of or the value of third dimension changes. That the as the line says, the bubbles to represent data points with 3 dimensions. The first dimension is x variable, second is the y coordinate, and third is the size of that bubble. So we will see in detail. So first one is the simple bubble chart. So the simple bubble chart is the most basic type of bubble chart and is equivalent to the normal bubble chart. Now the figure shows a simple bubble chart. Now here is our x-axis, which is having the values of 0 to 50, and this is our y-axis, which is having the values 0 to 70. Now say it is having same as the circular dots or the circular markers as this same as scatter plot, but the size of marker is not same. Means we are having here 3 dimensions, that is, one is x coordinate, second dimension is y coordinate, and third dimension is the radius or size of that bubble. Also we can use the number of parameters for showing the bubbles with colors, just as we seen in the basic scatter plot. So here we have plot the bubble chart for series 1 to series 4 with the different viewers and say views. Likewise, this is the plot. So we can see that this blue, that is the series 1, which is having with the x-axis value on in between 10 and 20, say approximately 15, and y-axis as approximately 20, is having the least, means linear volume or linear least size. But this highest, that is which is the series 2, which is having x value on x-axis on 40 and value on y-axis nearly 55, is having the higher volume as compared to this, right? Again, there is a next type of bubble chart, that is the label bubble chart, and the difference between simple bubble chart and label bubble chart is only that these all bubbles are labeled, means there will be some value, that is third dimension, will be written inside or say by showing an arrow, then it is called as labeled bubble chart. So the bubbles on a labeled bubble chart are usually labeled for easy identification, particularly when dealing with the different groups of data. Means sometimes you have more than 4 groups, say approximately say there are 10 groups. At that time there will be some difficulty in identification just using the colors. At that time we can use the third, that is the label or labeling of this bubble, right? So this was the 2 types of bubble chart. The third type of bubble chart is multivariate bubble chart. So in a multivariable bubble chart, the variables in the data set are usually more than 3, particularly 4 or say more, and therefore the fourth variable is usually distinguished with color. Now basically there were 3 dimensions we were using: x-axis, y-axis, or x coordinate, y coordinate, and the size of bubble. And the fourth direction or fourth dimension we can include by using the different colors. So this is called as a multivariate bubble chart, where there are at least 4 variables or 4 dimensions, then it is called as multivariate bubble chart. Now next type of bubble chart is the map bubble chart. So in map bubble chart is normally used to illustrate data by using a map, or to illustrate data on a map, geographical map. Then the color also, here also the longitude and latitude will be our x and y coordinates, and the color will be our fourth dimension, and the size of bubble will be our third. Means the longitude will be our first dimension, latitude will be our second, the size of bubble will be our third dimension, and the color will be our fourth dimension. The change is just that instead of having the x and y axis, we are having the map or the longitude and latitudes. So here we can see that this size, the sizes in Asian region are somewhat larger, and the sizes in the other region are somewhat lower. So we can easily identify that this is the plot which shows the distribution of population. So population of India, China is high, that's why there are 2 large bubbles, and the other countries having less population, so they are having less or these smaller bubbles, right? So these were the types for the bubble chart. Now next type of the chart is a pictogram. Now a pictogram graph uses pictures or icons to visualize a small data set of discrete data, and in pictogram the icon represents a predefined unit and describes the frequency of the variables in that data set, right? So here we can see there are categories and there are icons, symbols or pictures, right? So their categories are France, Italy, means these are the names of countries, and say there are images or pictures, or we can say there are icons for the respective value, means there are say 5 icons, there are 6 icons, 3 icons, 2 icons, etc. And the one icon is equivalent to 10 people. Now we are using this relative to people, that's why the person's icon we are using, and the one icon is equivalent to the 10 people. Means if we here for France there are 5 icons, means the value for France is 50. For Spain there are 3 icons, means the value for Spain is 30, and for Portugal there are 2 icons, so value for Portugal is 20 peoples, right? So this was an example of pictogram and how to read that pictogram. Now next type is radar chart, or which is also called as spider chart. So a radar chart are also called as spider chart or radial chart or web chart, is a graphical method of displaying multivariate data in the form of two-dimensional chart of 3 or more quantitative variables represented on axis starting from the same point, right? So here we can see, so when we use this radar or spider chart, when we have the multivariate data means which is having 3 or more quantitative variables. Now keep in mind that, guys, for radar or spider chart, the data or the variable should be quantitative, means there should be numbers, or say for example marks or quantity, right? The variable should be quantitative, and the orientation of the graph is two-dimensional. So we will see in detail. Now first one is the simple radar chart. Now this is the most basic type of radar chart and is equivalent to the normal radar chart. It consists of sequence of radii drawn from the center point and joined together. So as we have seen in previous definition, that is the axes are starting from the same point. So just for this spider chart or radar chart, all the axes start from this center point, which is the point 0. And there are these lines which are marked on 20, 40, 60, 80 and 100. Now this is a radar chart for 3 classes, class 1, class 2 and class 3. And next this type is called as field radar chart, that is the empty space between lines and the center of the spider web is colored. So when this empty space is colored, then it is called as field radar chart. Otherwise it is called as, if there is just these outlines, then it is called as simple radar chart. Then we will see how to read the chart. Now this chart shows the comparison of the 3 classes, that is class 1, class 2 and class 3, and it is comparing the marks of the 6 subjects, means the marks in economics, maths, physics, chemistry, biology and English. So we are comparing the marks, we can say average marks obtained by the students in class 1, class 2 and class 3. So by just observing, we can say that in physics, class 3 students have obtained higher marks, while as compared in maths, the class 2 students have obtained higher, then the class 1 are obtained somewhat lower, and the class 3 students had obtained lowest marks in the maths. Also for English, the class 1 students have obtained higher marks as compared to the class 2. Now look at this in subject English, the students of class 2 and class 3 have obtained similar marks, right? So these points are the marks, that is 80, 60, 40, and these are starting from this center, or the all are starting from 0, right? So this was the example for the simple or say field radar chart. Now next type is radar chart with markers. Now for radar chart with markers, each data point on the spider is marked, right? Then it is called as radar chart with markers, and the area between this center and line is not filled, right? If it is, this area is colored, then we will call it as a field radar chart, right? So now this is the radar chart having the it is having some we can say some points related to the product. So the product knowledge, skill test, passion, politeness, etc., responsiveness, communication, etc. So the blue line shows the target, means which target was set, means their target was set for we have to acquire the 80% skills, and the brown color line or brown squared marker shows the score achieved, means how much scored does the candidate achieve. So from this plot we can say that the candidate has achieved more score or the exact score in politeness as it was set for the target, but in all other cases, specifically in urgency level, it is scored less or too less than the target value, as well as in product knowledge also it scored the least or very less score than the target value. So this is the radar chart with the markers, means all the points are marked with marker, right? So guys, these were again some types of the graphs and charts. So again we will keep continuing our this series. So thank you for watching the video.